Did you know that the East was once one of the most secure regions in Nigeria, attracting businesses and people from around the world? Yes. But today, insecurity in Igbo Land has taken a very dangerous turn, and the East has now turned into more like a battle zone, leaving many of us to wonder if we are back to the days of the Biafran War. It's Chukandune Soku, and I would like to welcome you to another interesting and engaging episode at Voice of the Sun. Today we will be discussing the insecurity in Igbo Land, focusing on the genesis, the players, those who are involved, and also the solutions to lasting peace in the region. It's no news that Igbo Land right now is in chaos. We have lots of kidnappings, we have lots of armed robberies, we have Fulani herdsmen terrorizing people, chasing them away from their farmlands. We have politicians, we have attempts on politicians, basically, on their lives, attempted assassinations, and what not. The Southeast right now is in a state of chaos, and there are blames and counter-blames. But today we will be going into this insecurity in Igbo Land to discuss the major causes of the insecurity and how they have progressed from 2014 up till this point when we are now in more of what I would call a state of anarchy. Number one on the list is the Fulani herdsmen and terrorists who invade and kidnap Igbo people in Igbo Land. The root of this insecurity from the Fulani herdsmen started with Boko Haram and then developed into the Fulani banditry and terrorism we see today. Igbo Land seemed invincible to the jihadists and their chaos till around 2014, 2015, when the AK-47 wielding Fulani attackers started to make profound moves into the east. They invaded various communities with their cattle and destroyed the farms and livelihoods of Igbo, raped our women, killed our young and our old, and dared the communities to do their worst. In 2015, Fulani herdsmen with AK-47 rifles, charms, daggers, laced with poison, and machetes invaded Enugu, Ebonyi, Abia, and Imo states and killed scores of our people without any of these insurgents being arrested. Despite the heavy military presence in the east, in Igbo Land. This led our people to defend themselves in places like Ozuakoli, Ebem, and Akanu, in Ohafia and Umuchieze, in Umunochi, areas of, Abia State, among others. This same pattern of Fulani attacks and invasions were recorded that same year in 2015 in various Enugu communities, namely Agbakwe, Ete, Akbakume, Ebe, Opanda, Nara, Ibagwa, Okana, Oruku, and Isiobo, among many others. One of the stories that was very painful for us to learn was the killing of a young woman, Veronica Izugu, from Mbologu community in Ozowani, local government of Enugu State, in December of 2014. She was going home for her traditional marriage when she was shot by Fulani robbers and kidnappers who were operating on the road. On April 25th, 2016, the Fulani terrorists also invaded Okpabinimbo in Ozowani local government area of Enugu State. In the early hours of the morning, with over 500 Fulani terrorists, killing over 46 Igbo. They also razed 11 houses to the ground, and 14 people were hospitalized that particular day. The Okpabinimbo invasion came less than 3 weeks after the same Fulani terrorist herdsmen attacked another Enugu community, which is Uguleshe in Ogu. The herders were said to have told the natives that their kinsman, Muhammadu Buhari, is the president. And so they take land of whoever they wanted to graze their cattle at the expense of the host community. On the 21st of August 2019, Fulani herdsmen raped and killed a 67-year-old Igbo woman, Mrs. Regina Mba, at Nchatacha in Nike in Enugu State. She went to the farm to cultivate her crops and was attacked by the uncivilized and bloodthirsty Fulani attackers. These attacks by the Fulani herdsmen and terrorists continued unabated till 2019 and 2020 and beyond, even till date. There was no condemnation by the Fulani-led federal government. The security agencies themselves seemed complacent as Ndi Igbo died in their hundreds, with whole communities deserted. The Southeast governors were also handicapped in what they could do in rescuing the people from the obvious invasion of their lands, which constituted an existential threat, reminding Ndi Igbo of the Biafran genocide, falsely called the Nigerian Civil War. Until date, we are still experiencing Fulani herdsmen attacks in Igbo Land, with the Eha Amafu massacre of over 50 Ndi Igbo in Enugu in December of 2022 as evidence. Now, we must do our best to call a spade a spade. The Fulani herdsmen attack in Igbo Land has continued unabated and must be put on the list as one, if not the leading cause of insecurity in Igbo Land. Now, number 2, which is the creation of the ESN by Nnamdi Kanu to defend Ndi Igbo against Fulani terrorism, and the hunt of the ESN by the Nigerian army. Now, many Nigerians have erroneously accused IPOB of creating the ESN as a separatist army to fight the federal government of Nigeria, but that is not the truth. That is not the whole truth. The ESN was formed by Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of IPOB, to act as a regional force to protect Ndi Igbo against Fulani raiders and invaders, which the federal and state governments have refused to tackle. Now, we all know that in any situation where the government fails to provide for the people themselves step in to create social amenities and security for themselves. Take, for instance, in Nigeria, where we do not have electricity, adequate electricity. Nigerians have stepped into, you buy a generator for yourselves and you fuel the generator and then you provide light for yourself. This goes also to security, which people now live in estates where they pay their own security men to secure them. This goes into even goes down to pipe-borne water. We don't have pipe-borne water from the government in Nigeria. So Nigerians move into open boreholes and provide water for themselves. So this is basically what led to Nnamdi Kanu and IPOB creating the ESN as a form of security to secure Igbo lives and property from the Fulani herdsmen and terrorists who the federal government refused to tackle and secure Igbo lives. Now, the formation of the ESN was announced on December 12, 2020. And 2 weeks after this announcement, the Nigerian government immediately swung into action, and wanted to locate and destroy the ESN, which they saw as a threat to the government and an army created for the Biafran agitation. Now, the attack on the ESN bases led to the Olo crisis the following month, being January of 2021. On January 22nd, 2021, in search of ESN operatives and their camps, Nigerian soldiers invaded Olu in their usual reckless manner of handling Igbo civilians. They killed one person and burned down 8 buildings. And they would leave to come back in the next 3 days and kill 5 more people who were alleged to be ESN members. The army left, and in the following days, they were replaced by the Nigerian Air Force, which used planes and helicopters in their operation, trying to fish out those who they perceived to be ESN And all over social media, we saw videos of helicopters and jets flying over parts of Olu, you know, and people ducking for their safety and all of that. And so by the 28th of January, the authorities declared a curfew in Olu as more than 400 Nigerian soldiers were deployed to the city to brutally enforce that curfew. Now, the curfew and the harassment by the soldiers scared civilians, and many of them fled the city. You know, the same day, Nnamdi Kanu ordered the ESN to withdraw from Olu, away from the Nigerian army, to focus on the Fulani terrorists who were still in various parts of Igbo land, killing Igbo people and taking over their communities. A few days after the Olu invasion by the Nigerian army, IPOB gave the governors of the 5 eastern states a 14 days ultimatum to ban the grazing of cattle in Igbo land. Now, the governors reluctantly banned the open grazing in their states, but this did little or nothing to affect the security of lives and property in certain parts of Igbo land. Now, the Fulani terrorists, they continued to attack Igbo people in their various communities. They continued to kill people and take over farmlands even till date. Now, the federal government and its armed forces has refused to tackle this Fulani problem in Igbo land, but continued to invade Igbo land, various villages in the east, you know, in search of ESN members. Now, the search for these ESN members in Igbo land and the killing of Igbo youths by the Nigerian army has hardened the hearts of the people amongst, you know, against basically the Nigerian government, and has created more fear and insecurity in Igbo land. So we see cases where the Nigerian army go into villages, kill young men in their search for IPOB or ESN. Now, the more people you kill, the more insecurity there is in the land. The more people are hardened, the more they go into the bushes, the more they want to look for who would give them arms, for them to raise arms against the government, or for them to attack military or police structures or checkpoints. Now, it simply means that the hunt for the ESN has also contributed majorly to the insecurity in Igbo land. And we must put this in the list of why there is high insecurity in Igbo today. Now, number 3 on the list is the hardened criminals who were released from prison, leading to insecurity in Igbo land. Now, by 2020 and 2021, the insecurity in Igbo land was already taking dangerous turns. The Fulani herdsmen and the terrorists continued their attacks. You know, the army did little or nothing to stop these attacks, but continued to hunt and kill Igbo as they tried to quench the Biafran agitation. The ESN was confronting the Fulani in the bush, while the now famous unknown gunmen, you know, used the cover of all of this that was happening to destroy public and private properties and also attack security outfits. Now, many Nigerians and Igbo also believe that the attacks by the unknown government are false flags, basically, were false flag operations carried out by, you know, the government to destabilize the region in the face of the popular Biafran agitation. And while all of this was happening, Igbo land witnessed a sharp increase in the number of hardened criminals, many of whom were released from prison in 2020 and 2021. Now, if we remember, in 2020, during the NSAS protests, there were 2 successful prison breaks and multiple police stations destroyed in many parts of Nigeria and also in the east. Armed men who took advantage of the chaos from the protest broke into prisons in the south and freed, you know, thousands of hardened criminals into the streets. The breaking of the prison in Edo State and Ondo States saw a total of 2,051 inmates escape from prison in 2020 alone. Now, while on the 5th of April 2021, another prison break took place, but this time in Owerri, Imo State. And the armed group which attacked the prison released more than 1,884 inmates from the Owerri prison. Now, these 3 prison breaks are also responsible for the high rate of crime in Igbo Land. The already dilapidated security situation in Igbo Land made the region an easy breeding ground for these criminals. And we can see it from the numerous robberies and kidnappings that has rocked the region, starting from 2020, 2021 till date. Now, in as much as insecurity in Igbo Land started with the invasion of Fulani herdsmen, and then also we saw the creation of ESN to tackle that, and then we saw the army going after ESN, and then we saw all of this happening. The next phase was kidnappings now skyrocketed. There were more armed robbers on the streets, and this is because now imagine what will happen when you have over 4,000. Let's just say 4,000, around 4,000 hardened criminals who were released from prison, especially the ones released from Owerri prison, now free to raise arms, to get guns, and go back. And seeing that the insecurity in Igbo Land was now at a point where it seemed like there was no control. We were coming out from the NSAS time. Police stations were burnt. Policemen now wore muftis and moved around. No more checkpoints. So it was easy for these armed robbers who were coming out from, prisons to basically have a fresh breeding ground for them to operate. And this also increased the rate of crime in Igbo Land. This should be added to the list. When we want to say Igbo Land is on fire, is insecure, let us remember that thousands of hardened criminals were released from our prisons in the south, and they flushed themselves into Igbo Land, where they had breeding ground, and they took their operations to the next level. Now, number 4 on the list of insecurity, the causes of insecurity in Igbo Land is the destruction of police stations in Igbo Land during the NSAS protests and the consequences. Like I mentioned earlier, the insecurity in Igbo Land as we see today it was further heightened, by the destruction of police stations and the killing of police officers, by angry mobs who were protesting police brutality during the nationwide protest. Now, in Anambra alone, it was reported that the angry mob burnt down 11 police stations, killed 4 policemen, and burnt 20 police vehicles. And in most of the cases, the mob went away with police rifles, you get, and also released those other hardened criminals who were in the various police cells in these police stations. Now, in Enugu, the mob attacked 5 police stations and killed 2 cops, 2 policemen. The mob also burnt down multiple hillocks in Enugu and went away with, guns and released criminals. This happened in Imo State too, where the police stations were burnt. In Ebonyi State, 10 police stations were burnt and other police properties were destroyed. In Abia State, it was reported that above 3 police stations were burnt. The same scenario happened. We saw it happen all around Nigeria, but I'm just trying to give us, like a summary, like an overview of what happened in Igbo Land per se. So in the 5 Igbo states, the 5 core Igbo states, police stations were burnt, guns scattered away, armed robbers released. Now, in all of these police stations, the mob, like I said, freed hardened criminals who were locked. And these guys went into the streets, and continued their operations, met up with their old gangs, got guns. And because the police stations had been burnt and there are no more checkpoints, you understand, these guys had a field, just went about their business, killing, kidnapping, and what have you. Now, this also is another reason why there is high sense of, or there's high insecurity in Igbo Land today. Now, number 5, which is a very controversial one, is the unknown gunmen, I would say, pardon me. Unknown gunmen, which is now a popular phrase in Nigeria as a whole, and the possibility of false flag operations by the government or foreign bodies in Igbo Land. Now, The proliferation of criminals in the southeast, in the east, around 2020, 2021, also led to a popular phenomenon, which is the unknown gunmen. We all know. Now, we started to see a group of guys brazenly, boldly attack military checkpoints, attack police checkpoints, attack government buildings, and burn them, and, you know, and because nobody knows who they are, they were called unknown gunmen. And somehow, these unknown gunmen were tagged to IPOB. Now, as the attacks continued to happen, people now began to see certain prints, started to see the pictures clearer and saying, the way these attacks are happening, are you sure this is the work of IPOB? Actually, people said this is not the work of IPOB. This could actually be false flag operations used by governments or foreign entities to give a dog a bad name. Now, let us define what a false flag operation is before we go into the possibility of false flag operations in the East. Now, according to Wikipedia, a false flag operation is an act committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning the blame on another party. The term is popular among conspiracy theory promoters in referring to covert operations of various governments and cabals. Now, a closer look at some of the operations and attacks of the government facilities and the personnel in Igbo Land points to the possibility of false flag operations, by the Fulani-led federal government aimed at bastardizing the Biafran struggle in the minds of the Igbo people and Nigerians at large and the international community. One case in study is the Owerri prison attack, which took place on the 5th of April 2021. Now, the attackers targeted the headquarters of the Nigerian police force in Imo State and also the prison, which shared the same vicinity with the Nigerian Army, a police barracks, a DSS office, and many other security outfits around, of the federal government, which were basically in the same vicinity. Now, the gunmen operated for about 3 hours without any intervention from the Nigerian Army, the DSS, the police, etc. Now, the heavily armed security apparatus that surrounded that vicinity sat helplessly for 3 hours without putting up a defense or a counter. Now, and to add to the suspicion of a false flag operation, there was little to no casualty in these 3 hours of this operation. Now, how possible is it for gunmen to attack an area that is as armed as this, and there was no significant casualty? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, immediately after this attack, in their usual manner, the governor, Hope Uzodimma, and the Inspector General of Police, accused IPOB of perpetrating this attack. Without investigations, they told the whole world that it was IPOB, and as though they were acting out an already written script. Now, IPOB, however, denied any participation in this attack. The governor, Hope Uzodimma, soon backtracked and withdrew his statement and now shifted the accusation from IPOB and said that it was his political enemies, those who were enemies of his government. The Nigerian Army, however, the following day maintained that the unknown gunmen were members of IPOB and that the army had killed 11 of them. They showed bodies of suspected culprits, but journalists were refused to basically interrogate or inspect basically the bodies. Now, the spokesman of the prison also released a statement on the attack, but did not blame it on IPOB. He simply said that the attack was carried out by supposed unknown gunmen. Now, from the above scenario, it was obvious to some people that the attack had been staged by elements of the government to give a dog a bad name. Now, these kinds of operations will continue all over Igbo Land, but especially in Anambra, Imo, and Abia axis, making many observant minds on social media to say that the government is not being honest in blaming IPOB for the attacks, stating that the bigger plot is being hatched in the background and that these were basically false flag operations. Now, we would be time and time evidence. Basically, time and evidence would prove us right or wrong, and others who have spoken on this, if these are basically false flag operations. But there is room for suspicion to say that there is someone or somebody causing havoc in the east to make it look like a terrorist-prone region and to also bastardize the activities of those who are saying they want a new nation called Biafra, those who are saying that the Igbos are marginalized. Now, this is one of the reasons we have insecurity in Igbo Land. So, number 6 on the list is extreme poverty and the worsening economic situation in Nigeria leading to insecurity in Igbo Land. Now, I don't have to tell this to even a kid that wherever you find hardship and a bad economy, there is often a proportionate rise in the rate of crime in a society. Now, Igbo Land being a place where you have lots of businesses, you have some of the biggest markets in West Africa in Igbo Land. You have the Nnewi spare parts, you have Onitsha main market, you have the plastic market in Onitsha, you have the Ogidi building materials, you have Aba area. So Igbo Land already has a dense population or a saturated amount of people who have raw cash, people who have money, businessmen. And wherever you find in these amounts of people with cash moving around, you will find armed robbers and you find insecurity. And the way Nigeria is right now, with the high amount of insecurity, there's bound to be, with the high amount of insecurity in Nigeria, with the high amount of lack of security presence, with the high amount of hunger and poverty, there's bound to be criminals. Now, you now see how it all spirals down. The criminals, they were released from prison. The ones at home who did not find jobs to do, who now, turn into criminality. When you add all of this, you find that the Southeast, in as much as every part of Nigeria, is a breeding ground for insecurity. But the South is more because of all of the things that I've counted from the beginning of this episode. Now, hunger leads to criminality, strife leads to criminality. And this is also one major reason why there is insecurity in Igbo Land. A criminal comes out, he's seen that in Nnewi alone, he's seen around over 10,000 millionaires. People, if he kidnaps them today, they are willing to pay 10 million naira for themselves, their mother, their father, their siblings. Automatically, Nnewi will become a breeding ground for these criminals. And what led them to criminality? Lack of jobs, lack of government not caring for its masses. So, and for the last 8 years, we've seen how the economy of Nigeria has gotten from bad to worse. Some of us who used to eat 3 square meals now eat 2 square meals. Some manage to eat 1. Everybody's managing, and the situation keeps getting difficult and more difficult. And the more difficult it gets, the more armed robbery and insecurity you would have, the more criminality you would have. So this here is one of the reasons why there is insecurity in Igbo Land. Now, number 7, which is a very key reason for insecurity in Igbo Land, is political rivalry, killings and assassinations or attempted assassinations, Now, Igbo Land, just like many other regions of Nigeria, has been known for peace, relative peace, but also political rivalry. Now, the competition between politicians, when they are tussling for power, it often goes from mere exchange of words to all-out assassinations and escaped assassinations, just like we have seen, in recent times. These deadly attacks by political rivals, on themselves, often heightens majorly around the election periods, like we are in election period right now. Now, these political rivals are also major contributors to the insecurity in Igbo land, because as we see as we see the beheadings, as we see the attack on convoys, all of these come to social media, and it further promotes that narrative that Igbo land is an insecure region. So number 7 on the list is the political rivalry and killings and attempted assassinations among our politicians in Igbo land. Now, Igbo land, just like any other region in Nigeria, has been known for political rivalry and violence. We know how election seasons get in Nigeria and Africa as a whole. Now, the competition between our politicians often goes from mere exchange of words to assassination attempts, or pure assassinations itself. Now, these deadly attacks by our politicians who are rivaling themselves, it heightens around these election periods, like I've said. Now, they are a major contributing factor to the insecurity in Igbo land. Now, one of such examples of a political rivalry that led to the killing of a politician is the beheading of an Anambra lawmaker named Okechukwu Okoye in May of 2022. And he was kidnapped and later beheaded, and his head was dumped somewhere in Nnewi, around Nnewi South local government of Anambra State. Okechukwu Okoye was a political ally and friend of the governor, Soludo. And his killing and beheading happened around, or after, just a few weeks after the governor had been sworn in, and there were still some, people raising objections as to his victory and all of that. So that happened. Another example of politically motivated insecurity in Igbo land is the attempted assassination of Senator Ifeanyi Ubah, a lawmaker representing Anambra South senatorial zone, in the country's upper legislative chambers. And the attempt was on him and his aides as they were returning from Ifeanyi Ubah's hometown after attending a function. This happened on the 11th of September 2022. Now, we all saw how, accusations was flying from left, right, center. But one thing that stood out was that this was a politically motivated, attempt on his life. Some others said the attempt was on a businessman who had moved down from Lagos to the east and was somewhere around the road on that day Ifeanyi Ubah was passing. But whatever the stories around it is, it's clear that this was a politically motivated assassination attempt. Now, one other recent politically motivated security disaster in Igbo land is the well-coordinated attack on the Akokwa residents of Ikenga Ugochinyere, the PDP candidate for the Delta Federal Constituency of Imo State, on the 14th of January 2023, this year. Ikenga Ugochinyere, he is also the spokesman or the spokesperson of the Coalition of United Political Parties, the CUPP. This assassination came at a point where he had started to have loggerheads with the Imo State's government and also the federal government. And the assassins came to kill him in his home, but did not succeed. So they succeeded, however, in burning his house, various cars. They also killed his uncles and also killed other people in the compound. He accused the Imo State government of the attack on his life. His convoy was also reportedly attacked on December 23rd, 2022, just a few weeks before his home was invaded, And he would identify the men who did this as men from the Imo State government. However, the Imo State government has denied any involvement in the attempt on his life. But these 3 examples or 4 examples are basically to show you that Igbo land, the insecurity, the whole noise on social media, the killing, this convoy was shot up, this home was invaded. The politicians and their political rivalry is not left out in the cause of insecurity in Igbo land. And when we discuss insecurity in Igbo land, we must do our best to include that we have careless politicians who do not care about the people, who go about tussling for power, even to the point of putting their lives and the lives of those around them in danger, like we have seen in these cases. Now, what are the solutions to the insecurity in Igbo Land? Now, first of all, for us at Voice of the Sun, we would advise. Now, there are lots of ways to tackle the insecurity in Igbo Land. But there are few ways. If we must tackle the insecurity in Igbo Land, we must start from the genesis. So let our politicians and our traditional rulers be bold enough to speak to the federal government and demand that the Fulani terrorist problem in Igbo Land be tackled. Let the army and the police, of course, they know the locations where these Fulani headsmen are all over Igbo Land in the bushes. Let them tackle the Fulani problem, the Fulani terrorist problem in Igbo Land. When our politicians and our leaders have spoken up and these issues are tackled, we would have less, our people can be able to go to their farms. We would have less attacks. Even as we speak, the Fulani are have taken over lots of farmlands, taken over lots of communities, and are still attacking the indigents. So let our leaders come together and speak up. That's one. Speak to the federal government and speak boldly to the federal government. Now, the 5 eastern states should create a regional force to defend Igbo from external threats and also serve as a local police. They can use the blueprint that was created by the ESN, who have started to tackle the Fulani in the bush. Now, we saw where the Southwest, the governors and their lawmakers came together and created the Amotekun, which was more like a regional police, a regional force, in as much as they are not overarmed, but they serve as a deterrent to insecurity, a deterrent to criminals, a deterrent to Fulani headsmen operations, basically like a defense for the people's life and property, the safety of their lives and property. So the 5 eastern states should come together and create a strong, formidable, and bold security network. Not the sham of Ebubagu they created and gave them uniforms and took pictures, and they have no physical presence in the society, or the sham Ebubagu we have in Imo State that the government uses to burn villages and kill people, all in the name of looking for ESN or IPOB members, right? So let the 5 eastern states adopt a strong security outfit. If they don't know what to do, they should look at how the ESN has been able to, with the little they've been able to do, not little, basically with the little support they have had, how much they've achieved. Let them copy from them. That is one of the solutions. Now, the regional force, which would be loyal to no political party, because the issue we have in Igbo Land is that we tend to defer to the politicians tend to defer to their political parties when it comes to protecting Igbo. This person says I'm APC and PDP, and because they defer to their political parties, they can't come together and harmonize and put the people's interests first. They basically put their political parties first. Any regional force that would be created should be apolitical, should not have any loyalty to political parties, and at that point, they will be able to flush out any criminal gangs or kidnappers or unknown gunmen, what have you, that we have in Igbo Land. Now, the federal government should also, as a matter of urgency and should show wisdom in this decision, they should release Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Now, because when Nnamdi Kanu is released, we can now have a clear picture of those causing the chaos in Igbo Land. IPOB has come out repeatedly to say that the killings and kidnappings and all what have you is not their fault, that other parties are involved and creating, this chaos. Now, if we want to verify what IPOB has been saying, let the federal government release Nnamdi Kanu. At that point, he sits back as the head of IPOB and gives directives. At that point, because even as his detention, he has always maintained that IPOB should not raise arms against the government. IPOB should not kill Igbo people. IPOB should not cause trouble in Igbo Land. He has said that from detention through his lawyers. And IPOB has said they are not involved in the insecurity. Now, if you want us to believe that the federal government cares about security in Igbo Land, let Nnamdi Kanu be released. So that whoever is now coming out to say they are fighting or they are burning public offices, they are attacking security outfits in the name of Nnamdi Kanu, we will now know, okay, yes, this is happening in his name or not. And since IPOB and him have said these people are not part of IPOB, at that point, you know the federal government cares about security in the Southeast, because when he is released, the truth of whoever is doing all of this would come out. So we call on the federal government to be wise and to choose peace and dialogue and release Nnamdi Kanu so that there would be peace in the Southeast, in the East, so that the criminals will be fished out. Right? So, and if the federal government, in its stubbornness, like we've seen how African governments behave, refuses for Ndi Igbo, the 5 states, to create a regional force, then our lawmakers should move a motion, to include referendum in the constitution, so that we can basically, since the federal government does not care about our own security, we can basically say we can vote if we want to be in Nigeria or if we want to leave. But our politicians should be the ones to make a move for the people. Let the federal government do what's necessary, allow the Southeast to create its own regional force. Just like how the North has the Hisbah police, which tackles security and social vices in the North. The West has Omoteku, yes, I hope I'm right. Then the East should have a regional force to tackle insecurity in the East. Now, our leaders should speak up against any forms of false flag operations by the security agencies or any foreign entities to make Igbo Land look like a war zone. Many people have said that Igbo Land is experiencing what we call false flag operations. And that these false flag operations are either done by government entities or foreign bodies to make Igbo Land look like a terrorist ridden state or look unstable. You understand? That now requires much of military presence. If our politicians are wise, they should listen to these opinions and call out these false flag operations where they see or sense it. That way the people know that, okay, this is not an act of, say, IPOB like they blame, or criminal gangs. This is actually a false flag operation made to, projected to make Igbo Land look like a war zone. Now, above all, in all of this, the major solution is for the federal government to sit up and tackle the insecurity problem in the East, as well as other parts of Nigeria, to flush out the Fulani terrorists, like we mentioned, to flush out the criminal gangs. And instead of always looking for who to blame, let the federal government sit up and let the people know that the insecurity in Igbo Land is multidimensional and is not just as a result of one group of people. So let all hands be on deck. Let the federal government take charge and take lead in securing the lives and property of the people. Ndebanye, this is where we come to the end of this particular episode at Voice of the Sun. I hope you learned something from this detailed account of insecurity in Igbo Land. If you have any opinions as regards to what we've discussed today, please feel free to drop your comment on the comment section, wherever you find this video, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you see this particular episode, this particular program. Feel free to share, like, and support us in our mission to speak up for Ndi Igbo and speak up on matters that concerns Ndi Igbo in Nigeria. I remain my humble self, Chukandene Soku. Calling no goals until when we see again. Dalono, there, man. I don't know how you take decipher.